let's finish off this saga. JoeBros from weakest to strongest. Now, before the video officially begins and I do my whole, ranking of the JoeBros, I do have to say that I think I like this list compared to the previous two lists a hell of a lot more, and that's for a few reasons. I think the JoeBros, and how many they are actually, because I added like 2 for every part, is so much more fascinating than the villains and the heroes. The reason why I say that is that this list is so diverse with so many different characters, with so many different abilities. I think just talking about it is much more stimulating than the previous 2 parts. There are some spots on the final list that I have made that I'm still kind of iffy on, and I really do like that. I don't know, call me weird. I like options, okay? Aside from me waffling on, who is the strongest character that helped out their main Joestar from their individual part, weakest to strongest? And oh, by the way, hello, my name is Metas. Walk with me. Now, jumping right into it, D tier. And for the first time ever in this little saga I have made here on my channel, ranking the heroes and the antagonists of the JoJo parts, officially for the JoeBros at least, the first character is not from part 1. Holy shit. Part 1 is not trash, man, dear God. Anyway, that's not the point here. It's Yasuho from part 8. This is, I feel like kind of an obvious one if you know game, but Yasuho from part 8 has her stand Paisley Park. Her stand has the ability to kind of travel the internet, kind of like a glorified GPS, giving her answers here or there, or be able to communicate with other characters around Morio. That's about it. Other than that, Yasuho has like 1 FTL speed feat, but that's only when traveling from one part of the town to another through Paisley Park, and is not used for combat whatsoever. She virtually has 0 statements, 0 feats, has a very, and I would just basically outright state 100% support ability with virtually no attacking prowess whatsoever, which makes it obvious to me why she's at the very bottom with this type of tier list. However, in terms of actually scaling how supportive they are into the equation, she's basically a top tier. She's really good at what she does, she just can't fight. Now, that does not mean I don't like her character. I know Yasuho got shooters in the community. I absolutely adore her. She's one of my favorite JoeBros, but in terms of power scaling, she's just not it, dog. Do not kill the messenger. I am sorry if that upsets you. So moving on to the top of D, I have a character here that I think a lot of people are going to appreciate, and I couldn't not just add him, that character being Speedwagon. And yes, Speedwagon does have some feats that you can scale, unlike Yasuho. Now, I'm going to be fair when I say this. Speedwagon has feats, they're just not incredible feats. Like, he's damaged Jonathan, he survived a punch from William. In part 1 and part 2, he can perceive the attacks of Dio and some of the other Pillarmen, and even give commentary behind them. Other than that, nothing really there. Like I said, he has feats. I didn't say they were good feats, but they're feats, they're there. More or less, Speedwagon is kind of the peak human of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, but that's not really saying a hell of a lot. Honestly, the reason why he's not at the bottom of D tier is because somebody like Yasuho exists. A person with virtually no combative skills other than the one time she beat a crippled dude with a steel bar. However, to give Speedwagon his credit, he is incredibly smart. For whatever reason, and I always laugh when I rewatch or reread these scenes, how Speedwagon is able to break down these fights in real time somehow, which would make you think he's stronger, but he's not. The D tiers in these videos are like never interesting. That's the one trend that seems to actually have continued throughout all 3 of these videos. Anyway, moving on to C tier, and at the bottom of C tier, we have Guido Mista. Now, I'm going to be fair here when I say this. It's not a hell of an improvement, but it's an improvement. An improvement regardless that it's good enough to put him in C tier. While Mista shoots himself repeatedly in part 5, a numerous amount of times, he always manages to survive it even at point blank ranges. So he's decently pretty durable thanks to Sex Pistols being able to block some of those shots, and yes, even redirect them, meaning that Sex Pistols has the ability, or rather I should say the force, greater than a 6-shot revolver to redirect its bullet fire to other stands and stand users within part 5. with the added bonus that Sex Pistols, the stand itself, is kind of smart. I would even say smarter than Mista at times, as it's a lot more helpful to other stand users during certain fights within Part 5. Why I say that is Mista has this kind of tendency to brute force his way into winning, or at least helping other characters a majority of the time. That's why he shoots himself so many times, because he's just not thinking ahead. Now, I would like to say more about Mista, but any other further comments I would give about the character and his power scaling would more or less just be really mean, so I'll just move on. So at the top of C, next we have Mamazuku Rai. Now, I'm gonna be fair when I say this. I think Mamazuku Rai is fairly similar to Mista, but not in a dumbass kind of way, just in a, well, that's how his ability kind of works way. Mamazuku Rai's stand ability, Doggy Style, has the ability to unravel Mamazuku Rai, giving him slight regeneration abilities and being able to weave around opponents thanks to Doggy Style. He primarily uses Doggy Style to understand enemy stand users and what they can do, leading to Josuke or Yasuo kind of clutching up in the end if the opportunity does present itself. So the basic idea is, if I can heal myself, why don't I get myself injured by these enemy stand users to figure out their abilities a bit more? It's kind of the basic idea. And that really works for Mamazuku Rai because, shockingly enough, he is incredibly intelligent. In the fights he does participate in, he's able to easily figure out how they work and how to defeat them. And for whatever reason, he understands Calamity even more so than the other characters within Part 8, which in and of itself is a crazy feat, and is one of, if not only of, two characters that get really close to Wonder Review, being able to figure out how Calamity truly works. The reason why he's not placed higher is, of course, the same conundrum Part 8 and Part 7 have, thanks to later Araki writings, is that he just doesn't have any incredibly insane feats or statements. He's very intelligent, but he basically has nothing that could really save him against anybody higher in this list. And I'll be honest, given any other day you ask me, you can easily switch Mamazuku Rai or Mista. Just at the current point in my recording right now, I think just because of his intelligence, he could beat Mista, who is a more brute force type of character, who would struggle with an ability like Doggy Style, which has a slight regeneration factor to it, thanks to its unraveling ability. Moving on to B tier, and at the bottom of B tier, we have William Zeppeli. We've finally come to a character that basically has everything, and oh, he doesn't have this or he doesn't have that. We have a full character to work with now. It's not a great character, he's still incredibly weak, but it's still a character with everything we can talk about. William's power officially caps at Part 1 Dio and a bit below that. And that comes from the fact that William straight up states that he is 5 times weaker than Part 1 Dio, putting William somewhere at a early vampire from Part 1 level, that equating to being wall level. And even then, William still struggles to break down a steel door, somehow, and I will always laugh at that. But to be fair to his character, he just got done fighting Dio, who was vastly stronger than him, so he possibly was weak, giving William an excuse. But thanks to his Hamon mastery, and being somewhat comparable to an early Jonathan, because William taught Jonathan all of his techniques, therefore he is comparable, we know at most in terms of speed, thanks to Turquoise Blue Overdrive, that William should at least have high Mach speeds to possibly as fast as light speeds at the highest they could possibly go, thanks to the fight with Buford and Tarkus. With the added fact that William is a decent fighter. I'm not going to say he's a really good one because he got washed. He's okay, and I feel like he would beat the previous 4 characters lower than him pretty confidently. Hamon is doing him a hell of a lot of work here, I'm not gonna lie. With that being said, let's move on. And when I say move on, the distance between William and our next character is so massive, I have to clarify this now. It is insanely huge. It's borderline. I should probably actually put William a tier below, but I feel like William is still better than C tier and any of those characters in C tier that I have to put him in B, but I have to clarify, there is a massive gap between him and the next character. It's absolutely massive. We finally get into characters who have incredibly good statements, feats, abilities, scaling to other characters, really good showings, etc., etc. Absolutely massive gap between William and the next character, and that next character being Okuyasu. And even when talking about Okuyasu, things still get kind of weird. Okuyasu's gimmick is that he is the strongest. However, he's also the dumbest. This is how Araki made the character. Looking at some statements and some guides, it's clearly obvious that Araki is making a character here who who can basically scrape away anything from existence thanks to his stand, the hand. No limit fallacy, by the way, with that ability. I'm not kidding. On top of that, Okuyasu and the hand are comparable to characters like Josuke, who can hang around characters like Jotaro Kujo, who, as of in recent times, Part 4 Jotaro is stronger than Part 3 Jotaro. Thank you, JoJo Winter Magazine, for clarifying that. So in terms of stats, Okuyasu would be very powerful. In terms of AP, thanks to Araki's limitless statement, it's the highest that it could possibly be, as it can erase anything in existence. Now, in terms of speed, thanks to Okuyasu being comparable to Jotaro and Josuke, his speed would range from faster than light to massively faster than light, thanks to those two stands, those being Star Platinum and Crazy Diamond. Now, durability gets kind of weird. Okuyasu has only ever fought in characters who have pushed him to near death were Red Hot Chili Peppers and Killer Queen, characters who have town level AP or the ability just to erase something from existence thanks to its bombs. So it's kind of hard to gauge. So in this case, I'll default on some very simple scaling here. If Josuke is comparable to Part 4 Jotaro and Part 4 Jotaro is stronger than Part 3 Jotaro and Okuyasu is somewhere in that area with Josuke, I think small building level for Okuyasu's durability is perfectly fine, as that is something that Jotaro was easily able to output and deal with in Part 3. So what that basically all means is that Okuyasu is incredibly powerful. So why isn't he higher? Well, if you were paying attention, the gimmick is he's a dumbass. Even though his stand is incredibly powerful, he will never use it to its full potential ever. And since he is so easy to rage bait in a fight, he starts acting irrational, leading to a potential loss for himself. He could easily defeat a town level character, but because of his intelligence and lackluster combat abilities, you can easily exploit his weaknesses within a fight. So he kind of becomes this Schrodinger's Okuyasu type of argument where he's simultaneously weaker than Yasuho, but then simultaneously stronger than anybody in the S tiers because of his abilities. So he's kind of like a 0 tier type of character, but we'll never know because he never realizes his full potential and he kind of sucks at fighting because of his attitude and his overall intelligence. Thank you, Araki. So I think the best thing you can do for Okuyasu is place him somewhere in the middle, basically the gatekeeper for the higher level characters who know how to actually properly fight and use their stand abilities and their stats to their full potential. So moving on from Okuyasu and B tier, we have the girls, Foo Fighters and Hermes. Now, the reason why I'm putting them together is the fact that they have a lot of appearances with each other and of course with Jolene, meaning that similarly their scaling does apply to each other. So of course that should mean their speed should be at least at bare minimum light speed to maybe massively faster than light depending on how you want to scale Jolene, and their durability also scales to her as well thanks to the meteor feat, meaning that she has at least with these two bare minimum building level durability. AP for these two really get weird. These two never outright show it, it's always just kind of a passing mention, always being related to Jolene. So hypothetically, yes, Hermes should have AP associated with Stonefree at building level thanks to some fights. However, they're not properly shown, or you can make arguments saying they shouldn't be that high and should be maybe a few tiers below that. Same goes with Foo Fighters, as she was able to fight Poochie, never beat him, but then Jolene was able to do the same thing. So it's like Foo Fighters is just a lesser Jolene. And when it comes to their stand abilities, yes, they are very supportive, but in comparison to other characters above them, they are pretty lackluster. Pressurized water and healing are good on top of being able to double things thanks to Kiss. But in the grand scheme of this list, there are vastly better abilities. These two have the same problem Jolene has, where they have very good stats, but thanks to lackluster stand abilities, I can't place them any higher in good faith. So moving on to the top of B tier, we have Koichi, Mr. Reliable himself. With Echo's Act 1 having long range, Echo's Act 2 having pretty good durability and AP potential, with Echo's Act 3 having a ginormous boost and its physical stats being comparable to Josuke and Okuyasu with the hand and Crazy Diamond. However, in Part 4, he does get stomped by Sheer Heart Attack Kira and really doesn't do much after that. However, in Part 5, this is where things get different. Koichi compares Black Sabbath to Sheer Heart Attack, and in that fight, he does vastly better. Jotaro's comment saying that he was reliable is not supposed to be like a, pat on the back. No, it really does mean he is reliable. He has gone stronger. He can do things. So you're looking at a character with speeds in relativistic to massively faster than light, durability ranging from small building level to building level, AP of course being in that same area as well, with very high intelligence and combat abilities thanks to Part 5. And if it wasn't for Part 5, I'd actually place him below the girls. However though, if you don't think the Part 5 scaling is justified enough, you could place Hermes and and Foo Fighters above Koichi. I think that's perfectly fine. And that's it for B tier. I think B tier is pretty solid for the most part. I think a lot of my reasons are justified and have reasonings why they should be there and are above C and D. But coming into A tier, this is where we finally get into the absolute monsters. Everybody has good abilities, good scaling, good intelligence, good combat intelligence, so on and so forth. This is where things are going to get serious. So at the bottom of A tier, and a recent addition I have just added in the second day of this recording session, is Emporio with Heavy Weather and Weather Report. While Emporio only has one good fight, and that fight is really good because he defeats one of the strongest villains in the original universe, that being Made in Heaven Pucci, it's still only one fight with a stand with a somewhat bad track record for several different reasons. Weather Report and Heavy Weather have the ability to create any weather phenomenon and turn people into snails upon seeing the rainbow light of heavy weather. Extremely powerful abilities. Okay, I'm gonna go a little bit crazy, totally off script. Weather Report is like Potential Man. Theoretically, Weather Report could make Category 5 hurricanes if it wanted to. It could reach the highest level AP in the original universe, similar to Star Platinum, in a blink of an eye. It could reach city level to island level in terms of AP in an instant. However, it never does that, but theoretically, it could. And to build a Potential Man argument even more, Weather Report, before it goes to Emporio, lost to Pucci twice. Both of them being heavy weather, by the way. Supposedly a stronger variant of Weather Report, which I just said theoretically could reach crazy high APs. So I hope you understand why I'm confused on where I should put this character. He could be at the top of S, or he could be at the bottom of A. It just depends on how you look at him. He is as strong as White Snake, which can contend with Star Platinum, a stand with monstrous stats. However, we don't see the full potential of it. So if you wanted to argue that Emporio should be at the top of S, I'm not going to disagree, but I'm also not going to agree because there are arguments against it. Bare minimum, you're looking at a character with AP and durability being easily in building level, if not significantly higher, with speed also being FTL to massively faster than light plus. Easily. Anyway, moving on to the next person in A, that being Kakyoin. The character who failed upwards. Kakyoin has some really nice scaling, for the reasons being he survived a lot of the heavy hitters within part 3. The heavy hitter being Jotaro. Not only did Kakyoin survive his first encounter with Jotaro, being a building to small building durability feat, but he also outsped Star Platinum twice, meaning that Hierophant Green is at bare minimum massively faster than Light Plus, as he was also able to keep up with Dio and the world for a short time. The only downside that Kakyoin has is the fact that his AP doesn't change a hell of a lot over the course of part 3. The most we ever see Kakyoin do is a building to large building feat against the clock tower in his final fight with Dio. So you're probably asking, why is Kakyoin so high on this list if he's only slightly better than some B tier characters and Emporio, who is apparently city level in AP hypothetically? Well, that's because Kakyoin is very intelligent and has one of the best long range stands in the entire franchise, the 20-meter Emerald Splash and Hierophant Green's base range abilities just in general. Kakyoin was able to outsmart Joseph during their final battle with Dio, figuring out how his ability worked, and betted on the fact that Joseph would be able to tell the others. On top of that, he was also able to outsmart Death 13, which in that scenario he shouldn't have, but he was able to. He quite literally was not supposed to remember that fight and still won. While Kakyoin doesn't have the best abilities or the best stats in the franchise, he makes up a lot of it with his sheer intelligence. And because of that intelligence, I think anybody below him in a one-on-one fight would lose. Not to mention the fact the long range is really good and could fuck up a lot of people who are very close range heavy on this list just in general. With that being said, let's move on to Bruno Bucciolati from part 5. Now, I'm saying this with full confidence. Bruno is a monster with virtually no downsides. I mean that so seriously. Yes, I think Sticky Finger's ability is actually very good. The ability to zip and unzip anything is very nasty. And in terms of stats, he is no joke either. Being able to keep up with King Crimson at the end of part 5 makes him at bare minimum FTL to massively faster than light, as King Crimson also scales up to characters like Dio and Jotaro and even Polnareff. On the topic of King Crimson as well, Diavolo is impressed by Bucciolati and even gives him a bit of credit as a stand user and a gangster. And while it was a very short fight, Bruno does give Diavolo a bit of a challenge. Mind you, Diavolo scales to part 3 Jotaro and part 3 Polnareff. So you can place Bruno in the ranges of large building level to, now this would be highly egregious when I say this, city level at most. I highly doubt it's the highest level scaling when it comes to Jotaro being mountain level. So I think a good mid bowl for Bruno is like large building to small town in terms of AP and durability. Durability being a bit contentious because, well, Diavolo was so much stronger, so it could vary in that category as well. And on top of all of that, he's highly intelligent in terms of just raw IQ and combat ability, being able to outsmart and keep up with Diavolo by the end of the events of part 5. The only reason why he is not higher is because everybody above him has crazy statements. That's basically it. Bruno is the top of the top of the top in terms of stand users within JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. Like I said, he has virtually nothing wrong about him. I can't actually pinpoint like a major flaw in his kit. He's just really, really powerful. It's just he doesn't have like some crazy statements you'll see very soon. And finishing off A tier, at the top of A is Caesar from Part 2, Battle Tendency. Now stay with me here, I'm about to spit game, so lock in. Now in comparison to the rest of A tier, Caesar is not the strongest nor the fastest. At best, compared to other characters, you're looking at FTL at the maximum, with the minimum being relativistic. And in terms of durability and AP, it can range from small building level to large building level. And while stands are superior to Hamon, Caesar's Hamon is vastly better than a majority of stand users because he has the ability to become a mid-range fighter thanks to his bubble Hamon techniques. Now here is where shit gets wild. Enter Wamu scaling. Having very similar stats to Caesar, if not a bit better, he has a 2 of 2 statement unique to him, and one of, if not the best in the entire franchise. He is the best fighter / the most genius fighter in the entire franchise. This exists nowhere else, and is backed up by the fact that Wamu has been fighting people around the world for thousands of years. Wamu then proceeds to give Caesar a hell of a lot of credit in their final battle with each other, stating that Cars, Wamu's boss, would have been heavily injured if Caesar were to fight him. And since there is a moment of hesitation when he says this, Cars could have possibly died to Caesar. Mind you, Cars also has thousands of years of battle experience as well. So we're talking about a top 3 character in terms of combat intelligence. I would actually say Caesar's combat intelligence is higher than Joseph's. Joseph is just a smart guy who outsmarts people. He's not really like a heavily combative guy. We see this kind of in part 3. Joseph was always more of a predictive fighter kind of guy, while Caesar was always in the moment type of fighter. Both still very, very powerful in terms of those categories. Now, if anybody's going to argue that Caesar doesn't have the necessary like AP to defeat some of these guys on this list, so he should be placed lower, I'm going to stop you right there. Hamon has the ability to durability negate and kind of out-hack the human body in some instances, as it is similar to vampirism. This is confirmed in part 1. So Caesar has the necessary hacks to get around a lot of these fighters' durability if needed. Also, reminder here, he also trained under Lisa for a lot longer than Joseph, so of course his Hamon techniques and finesse is much better. Caesar's Zeppeli is a monster. He belongs at the top of A tier, no question. So moving on to S tier, at the bottom of S is Gyro Zeppeli. Gyro is like Caesar, except he doesn't have the Wamu statement, so that's saying a hell of a lot. Gyro is a master at the spin. The spin is able to execute and heal people, due in part to the fact that Gyro knows the human body so well. He's basically a high-level surgeon, and because of that, Gyro can manipulate the human body to a high level. There are multiple cases where he can manipulate the environment and completely disfigure the human body to his complete advantage. And at its highest level, in combination with the golden rotation and a perfectly healthy horse, Gyro can use Ball Breaker, the ability to destroy any defense no matter how powerful it is, as Ball Breaker has the ability to punch with infinite AP. Mind you, it doesn't need to break through any defense, it can just still work on you even if you're not in a defensive stance or using a defensive ability. However, we do have a problem. So if you caught on earlier about what I was saying about Mamazuku Rai and Yasuho, part 7 and 8 don't have necessarily the best scaling compared to the original universe. This also applies to Gyro. For a majority of part 7, Gyro is a bullet timer with wall to small building level AP and durability. However, to make an argument for Gyro, at least later Gyro, we have to use Diego and the world. Spoilers, by the way. In the past, I have said it a few times where there is this association fallacy that Diego and the world are similar to Dio and the world, and they're not the same, meaning that they don't share the same stats. Why even use the world if it's not going to be exactly like the world previous, unless stated otherwise, which has happened in part 8 with there being 2 killer queens, both killer queens being used completely differently, while the worlds act literally almost identical. The only difference being is that Dio is a vampire who gets a vampire buff with his version of the world, which Diego does not. So the Venn diagram between the world, D4C Love Train, and Tusk Act 4 makes all these stands massively faster than light and far above town level. Now this argument more is applied for Johnny than anything. However, since Gyro did fight Valentine for a majority of their final battle before we got Tusk Act 4, some of this logic and scaling also applies to Gyro for his speed mostly. If these stands are that fast, he should be at bare minimum relativistic to, I think, is a perfectly good mid-ball, just light speed, with the highest being faster than light, just because Gyro is off-guarded a few times during their final battle, with Funny Valentine and D4C Love Train, with maybe there being an argument for a higher durability scale as well. However, I think it's a lot looser. So depending on how you look at it, in my personal opinion, I feel like if you use the highball narrative scaling for Gyro, he is definitely one of the stronger JoeBros, mainly being carried by his hacks thanks to the spin and ball breaker. However, if you believe his lower stats are the more accurate ones and he's just a bullet timer with wall level durability and AP, with the highest being infinite thanks to ball breaker, I think a good middle of B ranking for him works just as well. I do think he's still more useful than C and D tiers and even William and Okuyasu, but not much farther than that if you think his low ball scaling is his accurate scaling. So with that being said, moving on to the top of S, and who I believe is the strongest JoeBro in the entire franchise, I welcome Jean-Pierre Polnareff. I'm gonna be so honest when I say this. If you know my channel and how many times I've brought up the Sunfeet and Polnareff again and again and again, and with the recent, Diavolo scaling, stating that like part 5 Polnareff is stronger than part 3 Polnareff, this should have been obvious from like the very, very, very beginning. To put you on game on how strong this JoeBro is, Polnareff is massively faster than light several times over. Depending on what scaling you want to use, anime or manga, Polnareff comes out to be one of the fastest stand users and just people in general within the entire franchise. You have statements going off of Star Platinum, who is confirmed to be massively faster than light during Polnareff's fight with Hangman, Diavolo, and even Vanilla Ice. Moving on from speed to durability, things are still crazy. Going off the classic Sunfeet, Polnareff was able to deflect laser beams that scale to town to city level, possibly even higher. Why this is insane is because Star Platinum is stronger, and Polnareff has stated that Jotaro is physically stronger than him, but can still keep up with Jotaro, who, mind you, even Jotaro sweats at the fact that he had to fight Polnareff. However, he is able to handle himself against that same Jotaro, meaning that his durability is quite possibly even higher than it was when originally calced against the Sun. This is further backed up by the fact that we have Diavolo. Diavolo in recent times, thank you to the Winter JoJo magazine, scales above part 3 Jotaro. So that means part 5 Polnareff is stronger than his part 3 counterpart, meaning that his durability is even higher than we think. So just like Jotaro, in a rare case, Polnareff's durability might be higher than his AP. So you're looking at a character with potentially large town to large city, maybe even higher, durability. And being able to make Jotaro sweat and push him to his limits, his AP would be in the same area as well, maybe just a bit lower compared to his durability, as Polnareff is a durability freak. I don't know how he survived against Diavolo being chopped up into bits. And while Polnareff doesn't have any crazy hacks because Silver Chariot is not built that way and is more built to be a stats monster, do not underestimate Polnareff. Unlike a lot of the people on this list, has over 20 years of combat experience and stand experience. While he might not be like Caesar, he's damn near pretty close. If I were to glaze him, he's basically a mini Jotaro. At the end of the day, you can make this list any way you possibly want. But if you don't have Polnareff in S tier, specifically at the top of S tier, I ain't listening to you, twin. I'm just not. Polnareff scaling is just absolutely dumb. However, I do think you can mix and match a lot of the characters on this list. I do think there is a room of argument to say maybe Kakyoin is better than Bruno, or Hermes and Foo Fighters are better than Koichi, possibly even deserving of A tier if you really wanted to get in there. All depends on your opinion, and I'd actually like to see them. And if there are characters that I didn't include on this list to where you would want to see where they would be placed, ask me in the comment section down below. I would love to see where people think I would put Iggy or Avdol or possibly Rohan on the list, even though I don't consider him a JoeBro. If everybody's a JoeBro, nobody's a JoeBro. That's why I went with only 2 from every part for the most part. So with that being said, like, comment, share, subscribe. Follow me on Twitter. Stay hydrated, and I will see you in the next one, ladies and gentlemen. Deuces.